Hi everyone. So in this particular video demo, I will be covering network policies, and this is the scenario for today. So we'll take the default namespace and we will create two more namespaces, front end and the back end. My front end namespace will be running the Nginx deployment, and the back end will be running the MongoDB deployment. And by default, if we don't have any network policies, all pods in all namespaces and deployments can communicate with each other freely. So I will add one network policy which will basically allow only front end, which is the Nginx web server, to communicate with my backend MongoDB database, which is basically very typical production scenario. I should deny all communication from the default namespace or any other namespace to the backend namespace, but I should allow default namespace to communicate with the front end. So this is what the final goal is. So we'll create two namespaces, front end and the back end. I have saved it to variable called nf and nb. I'll create those namespaces, front end, back end. Both have been created. I will label my front end namespace with a label selector. So this we will be using in the ingress policy, network policy later on. So my front end namespace has been labeled. I will create the front end deployment. It's using image Nginx and port is 80. So the front end deployment has been created in the front end namespace. We'll get deployment. So it's not ready yet. We will do a watch. So it's ready now. Similarly, we'll create the backend deployment. It's running MongoDB image, and the port of Mongo is default is 27017. So the MongoDB deployment has been created. We'll just get it. It's not ready yet. We'll do a watch. So it's ready now, and we will save the variable front end pod name like to a variable for front end pod name. So basically I am doing in the front end namespace I am doing a get pods, and from the YAML I am extracting that path. So basically there's one element in that array and I'm just getting the name. So it's same 42w9j, it's same 42w9j, 42w9j. So now I get the backend pod name from the backend namespace. I get the backend pod name, which is w8kw8, w8kw8. So I will get the front end pod IP also. This I will use for testing. So IP is 21 for the front end, and backend is 22. Now I will log into the backend pod name, and I'll just show you the Mongo shell which is in the MongoDB. So there's nothing, it's localhost, so it's doing a 27017. I'll just exit out. So I'm back to my terminal. Now I will log into the front end pod name and install Mongo shell for communication. I download the Mongo shell. It's downloaded. Change permission. Install. Exit out. So I will create one more pod in the default namespace for testing side by side. I will repeat the same steps. So container is not ready, so it's now ready. Download MongoDB shell. Change permission. Install. Exit. Now I'm doing a test from the front end pod, Nginx pod, to the Mongo. So the communication is successful. I'm logging into front end pod and doing a check to the front end, to the back end MongoDB. So it's going to 22.27017. exit. Same I will repeat from the Nginx pod in default namespace. So you can see it's same like default also can communicate, because we don't have any network policy at this moment. Now we will create the network policy. So this network policy basically resides in the backend namespace, and the pod selector is app equal to backend. So it applies for all the pods in the backend namespace. This is basically the subject. So it applies in the backend namespace all the pods, and the policy type is ingress. So it's saying that from front end pods which have the label app equal to front end, you allow communication. I have one more condition, like this is an AND condition, pod selector and namespace selector. So there's one more condition, and the namespace should be front end. That's why we label the namespace also after creating the namespace. So this is like an AND condition, and this is like the subject. So it applies on this subject, and this is the this is from where it should come from, the network traffic. So I'll save it, go back to terminal, create my network policy. Network policy has been created. We will get, so we can see that one network policy dash ingress, and the pod selector app equal to backend, 5-second backs. Now after the policy has been created, we will do one more check from the front end to the backend, from Nginx web server to the MongoDB, and it's all good because the network policy allows the communication 22.27.0.17. It allows the communication. Exit. But now if we do from Nginx pod, which is in the default namespace, we are trying to contact Mongo to the Mongo pod, it should fail. So after we created the network policy, the communication got restricted and it failed after some time, and it was passing a few minutes back as you have seen, but after the network policy the communication stopped. So now the third test I am doing is from the default namespace Nginx. I am doing to curl to the front end pod IP, which is basically this scenario, which is basically our default to the backend scenario, from default to the front end communication scenario. So as you can see, the curl is successful. Yeah, so that's it for this particular demo. So you have seen that how after creating the network policy we can restrict some communication, and if we don't have any network policy, it was like all for all. Any pod from any namespace can connect to any pod in any other namespace. So that's it guys. So I hope you liked the video. Please like, share, subscribe and comment. Thank you. Bye.